Hi, my name's Max. I've been experimenting with putting a hydrofoil on my boat, and I just thought I'd share my experience today. Just a little bit about my boat. It's a 5.5 metre inflatable. It was originally built for New South Wales Marine Rescue. The boat was refit in 2014 with a new motor and new pontoons, and I purchased the boat last January. So my first experience in installing hydrofoil, I installed the Stingray Starfire hydrofoil, which is a product made of plastic, and I purchased that from Whitworths. Now the Stingray Starfire is a no drill installation, and as you can see, it has two slugs that go into the side of the cavitation plate, and they secure the product on. Now, unfortunately, I no longer have the product. After a short water test last week, I found that inside in enclosed waters, the hydrofoil didn't make much of a difference really. However, a trip following that, we went outside into open water. There was a fairly big 2-metre ocean swell, and I've got to say that the boat performed really well. However, coming back through pit water, as you can see, the hydrofoil had slipped off. It's caused quite a lot of damage to the cavitation plate, so you can see where the slug originally secured it, but then that slug scratched all the way up the cavitation plate. It scratched the top side of the cavitation plate before and on the other side as well, just here, and scratched along the edge of the cavitation plate before it obviously came off, and when I pulled up at the boat ramp, there was no more Stingray Starfire hydrofoil. Now, the reason why I installed the Starfire is it had a no drill option, and I was hesitant to drill holes in my cavitation plate. But after water testing, and for the time that the Starfire actually stayed on, I was quite impressed with the performance, and I decided then that I'd go and buy another hydrofoil, but a better quality product that's a bolt-on mechanism. Now, I searched the internet and I did find that there are some other bolt-on plastic made hydrofoils like the SE Sport 300 that may have been suitable, but I also hesitate to put a plastic product where I'm really not comfortable with some of the reports that I've seen of the plastic tearing and breaking under pressure, so I've decided to avoid that route again. What I did is I actually went online and I found OzHydrofoil, and this is their product. So it got shipped to me in 3 days. I was really impressed with the way it's been boxed up, and this is the hydrofoil here. It's a really rock solid piece of alloy which has been moulded. It's especially cut to fit the Suzuki 90 engine in this case, and I'm going to take us through how I go about installing this. So the installation instructions are inside the box, and they're pretty detailed. They're basic, just one page, and what's handy is it gives a pretty clear instruction of the tools required here. So I've gone ahead and laid all the tools out here, ready to get the install done. Now, just an important point, I decided to get some brand new drill bits because I want to make sure I get a really sharp hole through the cavitation plate and the hydrofoil, so it ends up being a really nice and neat finish. Before I go into the installation, I want to stress one thing that I did write to Stingray and gave them a report about what had happened to the hydrofoil. Now, I need to stress that there's a lot of other people that have made comments online that their hydrofoil has come off, and all they did when they came back to me is they offered to send me a new one at 50% of the cost. Obviously, I don't want to go through that same experience again, so I'm not going to even bother. Didn't take the offer. I also went to Whitworths and expressed my disappointment with the fact that I bought a product which was $140 from them, and it lasted a matter of hours. And disappointingly, they did only give me a 15% discount on some purchases I made today, which came to about $5. I'm going to go through the instructions here step by step. So the first thing to do is to remove the propeller and cover the prop shaft with a rag or plastic bag. So here I go. Just a tip on removing the prop: you're probably going to need a non-standard socket because it's much larger than anything that comes in a regular socket set. And just to put a piece of wood up the top of your bottom of the cavitation plate there to stop the prop from spinning around as you undo the lock nut. So the prop's off. I've got a rag on the prop spline just to make sure I don't get grease everywhere. And now I'm going to get a clamp and attach the OzHydrofoil to the cavitation plate. It's actually a little bit tricky. I did it with the engine originally set flat to get the plate on top of the cavitation plate nicely. It's just a bit fiddly to get the cavitation plate squared up nicely on the motor, but I used a tape measure, line of sight, tapping it side to side to get it square, and a little bit of faith, I think. We'll see how that goes. Okay, so following the instructions, it basically says to masking tape along the edge of the underside of the cavitation plate, then mark out the front rear holes shown in the diagram on masking tape, then space the centre holes evenly between the front and rear holes. So you can see the diagram there. But in reality, I think that's easier said than done. So what I've done is I've just gone and put enough tape on the cavitation plate just to mark the rear and the forward holes. So I've marked my 2 holes in there to drill my pilot holes through. I've actually got a bit of a problem with the hydrofoil shifting a little bit, so I've decided I'm just going to drill these 2 holes in, and once I get those in I'll put the bolts in and I should be in a better position to square the rest of it up. Alright, so I've got my first hole through, both pilot holes through on the 3.2mm drill bits, and then I've just put one through on the 6.5 and put the nut and bolt in. What's interesting is just drilling through the alloy material. It seems the OzHydrofoil plate is actually harder to drill through than the cavitation plate on the motor. So you can feel it's a sort of pretty robust material, which is interesting. Alright, that's the second screw in and it feels much more secure now, so I'm comfortable that I can go ahead and drill all the rest in without the hydrofoil moving anywhere. Now I've just measured up where the holes need to go in, the pilot holes for the front, the cavitation plate. You can see I've had a few shots at it with the markings there. The instructions say to go in 20 to 30 mils from the front of the OzHydrofoil. The only thing is if I go in 30 mils, cavitation plate on the Suzuki 90 is just still too narrow there. You can see that's the 30mm mark, and there's just it says to go in 15 mils from the edge, and that'd put it up right against the side there, and you'd have a problem getting the head of the bolt through. I've come across my first fairly major problem. So I'm not sure if you can see that there. No, only just, but I've basically gone in, even though I've gone up an extra 10 mil off the measures on the specifications, and I've gone in just slightly under 15 mil per the specs. I've actually come up the top of my cavitation plate, not actually hit any metal on the hydrofoil. So I think at this point the hydrofoil's opening is actually wider, so therefore there's nothing to sink a screw into that. So this is the second attempt at getting the holes in the front. As you can see, I've got the pilot holes in there, but the edge of the cavitation plate is just of the hydrofoil is just there, so there's not a lot of spare, which is a little bit of a concern. Likewise on this side, and I've come a long way in from spec, so that's actually, I'll just get there here, that hole's come in around 80 mil from the front of the hydrofoil. Now I'm not going to drill straight through there with the 6.5s to do the actual bolt holes, because as you can see, getting in on this angle, the drill goes in on an angle, so I'm actually going to take the hydrofoil off before I do the 6.5s and just drill in on the hydrofoil from the top, just so I don't get the bolts going in on an angle. I've got to say, quite an effort to get all these holes pilot drilled and then drilled up and deburred. Deburring was not that hard, just used my end of the metal ruler. So I've got all the holes in, as you can see, so this is finished up with the 6.5 mil drill bit, as it says in the instructions, and you can see that the holes they're drilled up into the hydrofoil. One of the things to note, and I guess it's the only hiccup so far, but quite frankly I'm not really happy about it. So the instructions here state that you've got to measure up drill your cavitation plate between 20 and 30 mils in front of where the hydrofoil sits once you clamp it up. So I did exactly that, and in fact I took a bit of a conservative position and set the hole back a little bit further than the 30 mils, what it specified, and drilled that initial pilot hole all the way through. But on the hydrofoil itself, that hole ended up being just there. So as you can see, obviously not suitable to put a bolt through. All the other holes though have lined up nicely, evenly spaced. Just a real word of warning for anyone doing this. Really check measure those front holes. Don't go by this solely off the specs on the instructions. So next step, going back to the instructions, which we'll follow with caution from this point forward. Apply the sealer on the top of the cav plate around each hole and in the bottom of each hole. Don't know exactly what that means, but I'm just got a fresh tube of Sikaflex, so I'm going to Sikaflex it up, and I'll also see what I can do about filling that pilot hole with some Sikaflex, just to make sure we don't get any corrosion coming through that alloy in time. The next step, I've applied a really liberal amount of Sikaflex around those holes, and that's with the aim of ensuring that once I get the nuts and bolts in, that we don't get any corrosion. Those two there are just in there to hold it up whilst I do the work. I'll take them out and then turn them around, because the Phillips head screws are supposed to point down into the water. But as you can see, there's a nice seal on that, bit of overflow, that's alright. I've got terps and a rag to clean that up per the instructions. And also, you probably can't see that, which is good, a little bit of Sikaflex down there where I've managed to cover up that pilot hole. But next thing, I'm going to button it all up now and come back after that. So I've got all my nuts and bolts in there now, just lightly in, ready to tighten them up. The ones in the front, just because of the angle, I gotta get in there with the drill, sort of sit on a bit of an angle, but hopefully that doesn't cause me too much grief. The only thing that probably could have been planned a little bit better that might be an issue when it comes to servicing is just the bolt to release the lower end is going to be restricted there, and it was already a tricky one to work with, so probably could have planned the placement of that nut and bolt a little bit better. But anyway, think about that when you're doing your own install. As you can see, Sikaflex is squeezed out nicely out there, so it's a really good seal around it. I really hope I don't ever have to take this thing off again, because I don't know if it's coming off, quite frankly. Sikaflex sticks like nothing else. Okay, so we've finished it all up. I've just rubbed it all down with turpentine. Got to say, it's come up with a pretty nice finish. Some of that excess Sikaflex has popped out the sides and made a nice seal around the hydrofoil, so it looks really good. And here's just the view from the top side. Just tilt the motor down, and there you go, there's the top side. I've got to say, not an easy install. You've got to be pretty good on the tools, I think, to get it on right. The hardest thing was just getting alignment, the holes, and also getting those front holes in the right spot. And I think that's the gotcha when it comes to installing one of these, because following the instructions caused a little bit of a problem there. The look and feel of this thing, it's rock solid. If it didn't have the 10 bolts in it, which is almost feels excessive, but I tell you what, this thing's never going to fall off, not like the Stingray Starfire I tried on. There's no chance of that. Probably more of a concern that if I do need to take it off for some reason, it's pretty much a permanent fixture. I really avoid that. But yeah, I think the next update, I'll need to get out and get on the water and tell you how she goes.